10 biblical signs God is teaching you to walk in authority. There comes a point in your spiritual life when you begin to sense that God is no longer only guiding you, He is forming you. The prayers feel different. The weight of your decisions feels different. You begin to notice that you are not only being sustained, you are being prepared. Prepared not for visibility, not for recognition, but for responsibility. Authority in God's kingdom does not begin with position, it begins with formation. For a long time, you may have lived trying to stay unnoticed, trying not to fail, trying not to step beyond what felt safe. You learned humility, you learned obedience, you learned to trust. But now something inside you is shifting. You feel an inner call, not to become louder, but to become steadier, not to dominate, but to stand. This is often the first sign that God is teaching you to walk in authority. Biblical authority is not control over others. It is alignment under God. It is the ability to remain grounded when pressure rises, clear when confusion spreads, faithful when comfort invites retreat. God does not give authority to the strongest personality. He gives it to the formed heart. And formation often happens quietly, without applause, without announcement, without recognition. You may notice that your sensitivity to what is right has increased. Your tolerance for compromise has decreased. Your sense of responsibility feels heavier, not because you are being crushed, but because you are being trusted. God is not placing weight on you to burden you. He is strengthening you so you can carry what once felt impossible. Authority begins when self-doubt begins to lose its voice, not because you feel confident in yourself, but because you feel anchored in God. You stop asking whether you are capable and start asking whether you are willing. This shift marks the beginning of spiritual authority. You are no longer driven by fear of failure. You are guided by faithfulness. If you feel that God has been reshaping your character, deepening your convictions, and placing a quiet weight of responsibility within you, this message is for you. Authority is not given suddenly. It is formed gradually. And as we walk through these signs together, you may begin to recognize that God is not only guiding your life, He is preparing you to stand in it with clarity, steadiness, and purpose. You begin to feel an inner call to stand, not hide. This is often one of the earliest signs that God is teaching you to walk in authority. For a long time, remaining unnoticed may have felt safe. You avoided conflict, avoided attention, avoided the risk of being wrong. There was wisdom in that season. God was shaping humility within you. But now something has changed. You sense that staying hidden is no longer obedience. It feels like avoidance. This inner call is not loud, but it is persistent. You notice moments when silence no longer feels right. Situations where stepping forward feels necessary, even if uncomfortable. God is not pushing you toward visibility for recognition. He is guiding you toward responsibility. Authority begins when hiding is no longer an option. You may feel tension during this stage. Part of you still seeks safety. Another part feels drawn toward clarity and positioning. God allows this tension because it reveals growth. Fear may still speak, but it no longer decides. You begin to realize that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision not to obey it. Scripture shows that many were called by God while feeling unprepared. They did not step forward because they felt strong. They stepped forward because they felt called. Authority is not built on self-confidence. It is built on obedience. When God invites you to stand, He also sustains you in that place. You may notice that your concern about what others think begins to weaken, not because you no longer care, but because your desire to be faithful becomes stronger than your desire to be approved. God shifts your focus from perception to purpose. When this shift happens, hiding becomes heavier than standing. This stage often feels quiet from the outside, but profound within. You are not trying to be seen. You are learning to be present. Authority grows when presence replaces avoidance. God teaches you that standing does not mean dominating. It means remaining steady, clear, and faithful where He places you. If you feel a growing sense that you can no longer remain in the background of your own calling, pay attention. This is often how God begins teaching someone to walk in authority. He does not force you forward. He invites you. And when you respond, even with hesitation, strength begins to meet you there. Conviction begins to grow stronger than approval. This is one of the clearest signs that God is teaching you to walk in authority. In earlier seasons, the opinions of others may have influenced many of your decisions. You wanted to do what was right, but you also wanted to be accepted, understood, and supported. God understood that stage, but as authority begins to form, something shifts inside you. Approval loses its control. Conviction gains its voice. You may notice that you pause before agreeing, not out of resistance, but out of awareness. You listen inwardly. You sense whether something aligns with truth, not just with expectation. This inner clarity does not make decisions easier, but it makes them cleaner. You begin to realize that peace after obedience is more valuable than approval after compromise. This stage often brings tension. Choosing conviction can disappoint others. It can make you appear distant, slow, or uncooperative. God allows this discomfort because authority cannot grow where approval governs. He is teaching you to stand in what is right, even when it is not popular. You may feel moments of loneliness here, not because you are isolated, but because you are no longer guided by the same voices as before. God uses this space to strengthen your dependence on Him rather than on validation. Authority begins when your center shifts from external affirmation to internal alignment. Scripture shows that those entrusted with responsibility often had to choose conviction over approval. They were misunderstood at times, questioned, tested, yet they remained steady because their direction came from obedience, not opinion. God forms authority through this steadiness. You may also notice that your words become more measured. You speak less to be accepted and more to be truthful. Silence becomes intentional rather than fearful. God teaches you that authority is not loud. It is clear. It does not seek agreement. It seeks alignment. As conviction grows, fear of rejection weakens. Not because rejection disappears, but because obedience becomes more important than comfort. God reshapes your priorities so that being faithful outweighs being approved. This shift marks real formation. If you feel that your decisions are increasingly guided by inner conviction rather than external approval, recognize this as a sign of authority forming within you. God is teaching you to stand in truth, not in popularity. And as conviction continues to grow, your life begins to reflect clarity rather than compromise. Responsibility begins to find you before recognition. This is one of the most consistent ways God teaches someone to walk in authority. Before visibility increases, before influence expands, before others notice, responsibility quietly arrives. Tasks become heavier, expectations grow. You are trusted with more, often without announcement. God does this intentionally because authority must be formed before it is seen. In earlier seasons, you may have waited for opportunity, for acknowledgement, for a clear sign that you were ready. But God often reverses that order. He gives responsibility first, not to test your strength, but to shape your faithfulness. Authority is not proven by how well you perform when observed, but by how steady you remain when unseen. This stage can feel confusing. You may wonder why the weight increases without recognition following. God allows this tension because recognition can distract, but responsibility forms. When no one is watching, motives become clear. You act not for approval, but for obedience. This is where authority begins to take root. You may notice that your sense of duty deepens. You care more about doing things correctly, even when unnoticed. Small details matter. Integrity matters. Consistency matters. God is teaching you that authority is not about control over others. It is about faithfulness over what has been entrusted to you. Scripture shows that many were prepared in hidden responsibility before visible authority. Quiet seasons of stewardship shaped them long before public moments arrived. God values formation over appearance. When responsibility grows before recognition, He is protecting you from being seen before being ready. This stage also reveals your relationship with pressure. Responsibility without recognition can feel heavy if your motivation depends on acknowledgement. God uses this moment to purify intention. You begin to realize that faithfulness is not validated by visibility. It is validated by obedience. You may feel unseen at times, not ignored, but unnoticed. God sees differently. What is hidden from others is never hidden from Him. Authority is not granted because others recognize you. It is granted because God can trust you. And trust is built in quiet places. As responsibility increases, endurance forms. You learn to remain steady without applause, committed without reassurance, faithful without external reward. God shapes authority through this quiet consistency. When recognition eventually comes, it will rest on a foundation already formed. If you find that responsibility is increasing in your life before recognition follows, do not resist it. This is often how God teaches someone to walk in authority. He entrusts quietly, forms deeply, and reveals gradually. And through this process, your life becomes prepared to carry what once felt too heavy. Authority is formed in quiet faithfulness long before it is ever expressed in visible influence. This is one of the deepest stages of spiritual formation, and often one of the least understood. God does not train authority in public moments, but in hidden consistency. You may feel that nothing significant is happening, yet something within you is being shaped with precision. Quiet faithfulness is where endurance, integrity, and steadiness take root. In earlier seasons, you may have associated growth with visible change, measurable progress, or external confirmation. But as God teaches you to walk in authority, He brings you into a place where faithfulness must exist without recognition. You continue showing up. You continue doing what is right. You continue honoring what God entrusted to you, even when the outcome is unseen and the effort feels unnoticed. This stage is not empty, it is foundational. You may notice that repetition becomes part of your formation. Doing small things consistently, choosing integrity in ordinary moments, remaining faithful in responsibilities that do not draw attention. God uses repetition to stabilize your character. Authority cannot rest on occasional strength. It must rest on sustained faithfulness. Quiet consistency builds that stability. There may be moments when you question whether your effort matters, when results seem delayed, when progress feels invisible. God allows this tension because it reveals motive. If faithfulness depends on recognition, it will weaken under silence. But if faithfulness is rooted in obedience, it will endure regardless of visibility. Authority grows where obedience remains steady, even without reward. Scripture shows that many who later carried visible authority were first shaped in hidden seasons of faithfulness. These seasons were not interruptions to their purpose. They were preparation for it. God forms depth before He grants influence. What appears quiet from the outside is often where the strongest transformation occurs. You may also notice that your relationship with time changes in this stage. You become less focused on when things will happen and more committed to how you are living now. God teaches you that authority is not proven by speed, but by endurance. When faithfulness becomes steady, urgency loses its pressure. Quiet faithfulness also refines humility. You learn to serve without needing recognition. to act without seeking validation, to remain consistent even when no one is watching. God is not keeping you hidden to limit you. He is strengthening you so that when visibility comes, your foundation will not fracture. As this formation deepens, peace often accompanies it. Not excitement, not dramatic breakthrough, but quiet steadiness. You become less shaken by delay and less dependent on visible confirmation. God confirms growth through stability rather than spectacle. If you find yourself in a season where you are simply being faithful day after day, without recognition, without dramatic change, do not underestimate what God is doing. This is often where authority is formed most deeply. Quiet faithfulness is not a pause in your journey. It is the place where strength becomes reliable, character becomes grounded, and trust becomes unwavering. God teaches authority through hidden faithfulness because authority requires stability. And when faithfulness becomes natural, authority begins to emerge, not as performance, but as presence. Fear may still speak, but it no longer governs your movement. This is one of the most revealing signs that God is teaching you to walk in authority. Earlier in your journey, fear often shaped your decisions. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of being exposed, fear of stepping beyond what felt safe. God did not condemn that stage. He understood your limits and walked with you through them. But now, something has changed. Fear may still appear, but it no longer has the authority to decide your direction. This stage is not about becoming fearless. It is about becoming faithful despite fear. You begin to notice that even when uncertainty rises, you do not retreat as quickly as before. You feel the hesitation, but you also feel a deeper pull forward. God is teaching you that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to obey it. Authority grows when obedience becomes stronger than fear's voice. You may experience moments where your heart races, your mind questions, and your instincts warn you to step back. Yet something steadier within you holds your ground. This steadiness does not come from confidence in yourself. It comes from trust in God. Over time, you begin to recognize that fear often exaggerates risk while minimizing God's presence. Authority forms when that illusion loses power. There may still be situations that make you uncomfortable, conversations that stretch you, decisions that carry weight, responsibilities that feel larger than your experience. God does not remove these pressures immediately because pressure reveals where fear still hides. Each time you move forward despite fear, its grip weakens. Authority grows through repeated obedience under tension. Scripture consistently shows that those entrusted with responsibility were not fearless, but they were faithful. They acted while still feeling inadequate. They spoke while still feeling uncertain. They moved while still feeling the weight of risk. God did not wait for their fear to disappear. He strengthened them through action. Authority is formed through this process, not before it. You may also notice that your relationship with fear changes. Instead of reacting immediately, you observe it. You recognize its patterns. You question its assumptions. God gives you clarity to see that fear often protects comfort rather than purpose. When this realization settles, fear loses its authority to lead. This stage also brings a quiet strengthening of identity. You begin to see yourself not as someone trying to avoid failure, but as someone willing to remain faithful. The focus shifts from outcome to obedience. Fear weakens when obedience becomes the priority. Others may not see this transformation outwardly. You may still appear calm, steady, and measured, but internally, something significant has changed. You no longer wait for fear to disappear before acting. You act while trusting God within the uncertainty. This is where authority becomes real. If fear still speaks in your life but no longer controls your direction, recognize this as a powerful sign that God is teaching you to walk in authority. He is not removing your humanity. He is strengthening your faith. Authority is not the absence of fear, it is the presence of obedience despite it. And as this formation continues, fear gradually loses its voice, while faith becomes your steady guide forward. Your words begin to carry weight, not because you are trying to be heard, but because something within you has been formed. This is one of the clearest signs that God is teaching you to walk in authority. In earlier seasons, you may have spoken often, trying to explain, trying to convince, trying to be understood, but now something has changed. You speak less, yet when you do, there is clarity, steadiness, and impact. Authority is not loud, but it is felt. This shift does not happen suddenly. It grows as your life becomes aligned. Words carry weight when they come from integrity rather than impulse. When what you say reflects how you live, people sense consistency. God forms authority by shaping the heart first, and when the heart is steady, speech becomes grounded. You are no longer speaking to fill silence. You are speaking to bring direction. You may notice that others begin to listen differently, not because you demand attention, but because your words are measured. You do not rush to speak. You do not react emotionally. You pause, observe, and respond with clarity. God teaches you that authority is expressed through restraint as much as through speech. Silence becomes intentional rather than hesitant. This stage often refines your relationship with truth. You feel less need to exaggerate, defend, or justify. Words become simpler, but stronger. God removes excess so that what remains is clear. Authority grows when speech is not driven by emotion, pressure, or insecurity, but by conviction and alignment. You may also notice that your words begin to influence more than before, not through force, but through steadiness. Conversations shift, confusion settles, direction becomes clearer. God uses formed speech to bring stability where there was uncertainty. This is not about control over others, it is about clarity within yourself. Scripture shows that those shaped by God often spoke with quiet authority. Their words were not many, but they carried meaning. God does not give weight to speech that is careless. He gives weight to speech formed through obedience, patience, and integrity. Authority is reflected in the consistency between life and language. This stage also requires responsibility. Words that carry weight can build or wound, guide or mislead. God teaches you to guard your speech carefully. You become more aware of when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to listen. Authority includes restraint. You may feel a new sense of accountability for what you say. This is not pressure, it is maturity. God is entrusting you with influence, not through position, but through presence. As your life becomes steadier, your words become clearer. If you notice that your words are beginning to carry quiet weight, recognize this as a sign that God is teaching you to walk in authority. He is shaping your speech to reflect truth, steadiness, and alignment. Authority is not expressed through volume, but through clarity. And as your formation continues, your words will not need to demand attention. Their weight will speak for itself. You begin to notice that you are being corrected, not condemned. This is a crucial stage in learning to walk in authority. Earlier in your journey, correction may have felt heavy, almost like rejection. Mistakes produced discouragement. Failure produced doubt. But now something has changed. When God corrects you, you sense direction rather than rejection. You feel adjustment, not abandonment. Authority grows in those who can be corrected without becoming shaken. God does not correct to diminish you, He corrects to refine you. Authority cannot rest on unexamined habits, unchecked reactions, or hidden weaknesses. So God begins to expose what must be strengthened, not all at once, but steadily. You may notice patterns being revealed, reactions being softened, motives being clarified. This is not condemnation, it is formation. You may experience moments where you recognize something within yourself that needs change, perhaps impatience, perhaps hesitation, perhaps pride. perhaps fear. Instead of feeling crushed by this awareness, you feel guided. God shows you what must be adjusted and provides the strength to grow beyond it. Authority requires teachability, and teachability requires humility. This stage often transforms your relationship with failure. Instead of seeing mistakes as proof that you are unworthy, you begin to see them as opportunities for growth. God does not remove responsibility when you stumble. He deepens formation through it. Authority is not built on perfection, but on responsiveness to correction. Scripture consistently shows that those entrusted with responsibility were shaped through correction. They were redirected, refined, and instructed, not because they were rejected, but because they were being prepared. God disciplines what He intends to trust. Correction is evidence of formation, not of failure. You may also notice that your response to correction changes. You become less defensive, less reactive, more reflective. Instead of resisting adjustment, you welcome clarity. God is teaching you that authority requires flexibility of heart. A rigid heart cannot be shaped. A teachable heart becomes steady. This stage also deepens trust. You realize that God's correction is not harsh, it is precise. He does not overwhelm you with everything at once. He reveals what you are ready to grow through. This builds confidence, not in yourself, but in His patience and guidance. Others may not see this internal work. Correction often happens quietly, without external visibility, but its effect becomes evident over time. Your responses change, your reactions soften, your steadiness increases. Authority becomes more grounded because your foundation is being refined. If you find that correction no longer discourages you, but guides you, recognize this as a powerful sign that God is teaching you to walk in authority. He is shaping your character so that what you carry is not fragile, but steady. Authority belongs to those who remain teachable, and as you continue to grow through correction, rather than resist it, your life becomes aligned, grounded, and prepared for greater responsibility. You begin to feel a growing responsibility to protect what God has entrusted to you. This is one of the clearest signs that authority is forming within you. Earlier in your journey, you may have focused mainly on receiving guidance, strength, and direction. But now something has shifted. You are no longer only being sustained, you are being entrusted, and with trust comes responsibility. What God entrusts is not always visible or dramatic. Sometimes it is your character. Sometimes it is your peace. Sometimes it is your influence, your relationships, your calling, your integrity, your time, your spiritual clarity. You begin to sense that these things must be guarded, not out of fear, but out of stewardship. Authority includes protection. This stage changes how you respond to what once felt harmless. You become more attentive to what weakens your clarity, drains your peace, or pulls you away from alignment. Not everything that is allowed is beneficial. God begins sharpening your discernment so you can recognize what strengthens what He placed in your care and what quietly erodes it. You may notice that you become more intentional. You guard your words more carefully. You guard your decisions more thoughtfully. You guard your attention more consciously. This is not rigidity, it is maturity. Authority requires awareness of what must be preserved so that growth can continue without being compromised. Scripture shows that those entrusted with responsibility were called to guard what they received, not with fear, but with faithfulness. Authority is not about controlling others. It is about remaining faithful to what God has placed in your hands. When trust increases, stewardship deepens. This stage may also bring a quiet seriousness, not heaviness, but awareness. You realize that what God is forming in you is valuable and cannot be treated casually. You stop exposing your life to influences that weaken clarity or compromise direction. God strengthens your ability to discern not only what is right, but what is wise. You may feel a deeper sense of accountability, not toward people, but toward God. This awareness is not pressure, it is alignment. Authority does not come from position, it comes from trust, and trust grows when what is entrusted is guarded faithfully. Others may not understand why you become more selective, more intentional, more protective. But God is not shaping you for appearance. He is shaping you for endurance. What is guarded grows stronger. What is neglected weakens. Authority requires this understanding. If you feel a growing responsibility to protect what God has placed in your life, recognize this as a sign that He is teaching you to walk in authority. You are not being restricted, you are being entrusted. And through faithful stewardship, your life becomes steadier, clearer, and more aligned with what God is building. Authority matures when stewardship becomes intentional. And as you guard what God has entrusted to you, you begin to realize that authority is not about holding power. It is about holding responsibility faithfully. You begin to feel drawn toward purpose rather than comfort. This is one of the final and most defining signs that God is teaching you to walk in authority. Earlier in your journey, comfort may have shaped many of your choices. Stability, predictability, and safety felt necessary. God allowed that season because it gave you grounding. But now something has changed. What is comfortable no longer satisfies. You feel pulled toward what builds, even when it requires effort. This shift does not come from restlessness, it comes from clarity. You begin to recognize that comfort often preserves the present while purpose prepares the future. God is not removing peace from your life, He is redirecting your focus. Authority grows in those who are willing to move where growth is required, rather than remain where comfort is maintained. You may notice that certain opportunities that once felt appealing now feel empty, not wrong, but insufficient. At the same time, paths that require courage, discipline, and responsibility begin to feel meaningful. God reshapes desire so that purpose becomes more attractive than ease. This is not pressure, it is alignment. This stage often requires courage. Choosing purpose may involve uncertainty. It may demand patience. It may require letting go of what is familiar. God does not rush you through this process. He strengthens you within it. Authority is formed when you choose growth, even when comfort invites you to stay still. Scripture shows that those called to carry responsibility often stepped beyond what felt safe, not because they were reckless, but because they were guided. Purpose does not eliminate peace, it deepens it. When your life aligns with what God is building, effort no longer feels empty, it feels meaningful. You may also notice that your relationship with difficulty changes. Challenges no longer feel like interruptions to avoid. They feel like steps within your formation. God teaches you that purpose is not proven in comfort, but in perseverance. Authority grows through faithful endurance. Others may not understand your choices. They may see you stepping away from what seems safe toward what seems uncertain. But God is not guiding you toward instability. He is guiding you toward alignment. Comfort protects familiarity. Purpose builds maturity. If you feel increasingly drawn toward what requires growth rather than what offers ease, recognize this as a sign that God is teaching you to walk in authority. He is reshaping your desires so that your life aligns with what He is forming within you. Authority is sustained by purpose, not by comfort. And as you continue to choose what builds rather than what merely feels safe, your life becomes steady, grounded, and prepared for what God is entrusting to you. You come to understand that authority is service, not control. This realization marks the completion of a long inner formation. At this point, God has stripped away many false ideas about power, visibility, and influence. You no longer associate authority with dominance, status, or the need to assert yourself. Instead, authority begins to feel like responsibility willingly carried for the good of others. This shift is quiet, but it is profound. Earlier in life, authority may have seemed connected to position or recognition. You may have believed that being in charge meant being followed, obeyed, or affirmed. God patiently dismantles that idea. He teaches you that true authority does not elevate the self. It stabilizes the environment. It brings order, clarity, and safety where there was confusion or fear. Authority serves before it leads. At this stage, you become more attentive to how your presence affects others. Not to control them, but to support them. You notice that when you are grounded, others feel steadier. When you are clear, others find direction. God shows you that authority flows from alignment, not assertion. You do not need to demand respect. Consistency earns trust. This understanding also reshapes how you respond to conflict. You no longer seek to win or prove yourself. You seek to restore clarity. You listen more. You respond with intention rather than emotion. God forms authority by teaching you restraint. Authority does not react impulsively, it responds wisely. You may also notice that your desire to correct others changes. Instead of pointing out faults, you model stability. Instead of controlling outcomes, you guide process. God teaches you that people grow more through example than instruction. Authority is lived, not displayed. Scripture consistently presents authority as stewardship. Those entrusted with much are called to serve faithfully, not to dominate. God aligns your heart with this truth by refining your motives. You stop asking how much influence you have and start asking how well you care for what has been entrusted to you. Authority becomes less about power and more about faithfulness. This stage also brings peace. When authority is rooted in service, pressure decreases. You are no longer trying to maintain control over everything. You focus on doing what is right within your reach and trust God with what extends beyond it. This brings rest to the soul. Authority no longer feels heavy, it feels purposeful. Others may naturally begin to seek your counsel, not because you position yourself as an authority, but because your life reflects steadiness. God often confirms authority through trust rather than title. When people feel safe around you, clarity follows. That is authority in its purest form. If you have reached a place where serving others feels more natural than controlling outcomes, recognize this as the fruit of deep formation. God has taught you to walk in authority not by elevating you above others, but by grounding you firmly within His purpose. Authority that serves endures. It does not depend on recognition, position, or affirmation. It rests on alignment, faithfulness, and love. And when authority is lived rather than displayed, it becomes a quiet force that brings order, stability, and peace wherever God places you. Authority is given to those who first learn to be governed by God. This is the final and most essential truth. Everything that formed within you, the quiet faithfulness, the surrender of fear, the growth of conviction, the stewardship of what was entrusted, the movement toward purpose, all of it was preparation for this alignment. Authority in God's kingdom does not begin with leading others. It begins with being led by Him. When God governs your heart, authority becomes stable. You are no longer driven by impulse, pressure, or the need to control outcomes. Your decisions begin to reflect clarity rather than urgency. You act with intention, but without desperation. This steadiness is not something you force. It is something that grows when your life aligns under God's direction. Authority flows from alignment. You may notice that your need to prove yourself fades. You no longer feel the urge to demonstrate strength or defend your position. When God governs you, identity becomes secure. You know who you are, not because of recognition, but because of relationship. This inner stability is the foundation of true authority. Without it, authority becomes fragile. With it, authority becomes steady. Being governed by God also refines your response to uncertainty. You do not panic when outcomes are unclear. You remain present, attentive, and faithful. Authority is not the ability to control every situation. It is the ability to remain grounded within it. God teaches you to stand firm without becoming rigid, to act without becoming driven, to lead without losing humility. This alignment also transforms how you carry responsibility. You no longer see authority as weight placed on your shoulders alone. You recognize that what God entrusts, He also sustains. Authority is shared with Him, not carried without Him. This removes strain and replaces it with purpose. You act faithfully, knowing that results rest in God's hands. You may also recognize that authority does not isolate you. It deepens your dependence on God. The more you are entrusted, the more you remain connected. Authority without dependence leads to pride. Authority under God produces humility and clarity. This balance keeps your life aligned and your heart grounded. Others may see only the outward steadiness, the clarity in your words, the strength in your presence. But you know where it comes from. Authority is not something you created. It is something God formed through patience, correction, surrender, and faithfulness. Every hidden season contributed to this alignment. If you sense that your life is becoming more steady, more intentional, and more aligned under God's direction, recognize what He has done. He has taught you to walk in authority, not through power, but through obedience, not through control, but through trust, not through self-reliance, but through dependence on Him. Authority belongs to those who remain governed by God. And when your life is aligned under His guidance, your presence brings clarity, your actions bring stability, and your faith becomes a quiet force that shapes everything around you.